What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be diving into some smart contracts. We'll explore how these contracts can transform traditional banking into decentralized systems. We're going to go step by step using Truffle as our testing framework and Ganache for some mock ETH. Let's jump into this. So for starting this off, we're going to have to use Truffle init to be able to get all the necessary supplies that we need from Truffle. You can see contracts, migrations, test, and the Truffle config. Before we start building out the smart contract, I do want us to know kind of the premise or / background of what we're actually doing. So first off, we're going to be having a smart contract named Bank. It's going to have a simple banking system on the Ethereum blockchain. Users will be able to transfer Ether from one address to the other. They will also be able to withdraw Ether from their own address. Only the contract owner will be able to execute specific functions due to access restrictions. Events to log and monitor transactions. The contract has a safety check to ensure that transactions are only occurring if sufficient funds are available, and also have certain actions are only taken by specific users, like the owner. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump in to start building out this smart contract. A few things we're going to do by starting off is setting up the environment by having some state variables. First off, it's going to be the owner, which will be the message.sender. We're going to have the second address, which will be considered as our friend. We're going to have a mapping, which will be for each balance through each addresses. The third thing will be, once we go ahead and actually make this transfer, we're going to need some sort of event to be able to display or /log. Alright, so the second step now we're going to be identifying is going to be two of the modifiers. One modifier will be for when the message.sender is then going to be equal to the owner. The second thing is going to be to ensure that the balance of whatever the account is will be enough to actually make that transaction. Alright, so I'm going to start now adding a constructor function. The constructor function is going to consist of two different things. First off will be whoever the owner is will equal to the message.sender. The second thing is, since I don't know the address of the actual friend, I'm going to have to identify it myself. I will also be allowing a function that will allow depositing Ether into this contract. Alright, so let's add a way for someone to be able to check their balance, whether it's of their own or of someone else's. Alright, so now we're going to start adding our last two functions. The first one's going to be the transfer of the money, which will be from the message.sender to whoever the friend account is. The second thing is, if there's any issues going on, we have a fallback function which will allow to be able to withdraw the amount of money that was sent. Alright, before we start using Truffle now to be able to test any of these functions, what I want to do is be able to actually see if the smart contract works. Not only that, but to be able to kind of give you more of a visual representation of how it's used. So what we're going to do is take all of our VS Code and start moving it over to remix.ethereum. It's probably one of the best ways to kind of check it out and see if this functions and transactions actually work. So let's go ahead and go over there. Alright, so everything has been moved over from VS to remix.ethereum. So the next step you want to do always is to click somewhere and just press Ctrl S a bunch of times. Once you do so, you can see that there's a green check mark, or you can just press the compile button. Either way, it's the same thing. The next thing you can do is go over to the deployment. So deployment's over here. I'm just using Shanghai for my VM. And then I do have my two accounts here currently. My second account I always like to use is the friend address. And just make sure you go back onto your first account when you deploy. So when doing so, I can just go ahead and deploy towards friend. I did it over the message.sender, which would be the first account. So now I know that the owner, which was for that C4, and then here's my friend account. So I'm going to real currently just check to make sure that there are funds inside my balance for the message.sender. It should be 5 ETH. Perfect. The next thing I'm going to do now is just do a transfer. So I'm going to take the address of the friend. It's going to be 2. The second thing I'm going to do is just copy this over because I don't want to count all the zeros. And just press 1 ETH. Once I do so, it will show the transaction. When I look back over here, I can see the display of everything. So I can see from, who to, the transfer, and then we have the total amount. Alright, I hope that gave you a good visual representation of how you actually use this smart contract. Now what we're going to do is start using the features in Truffle for its migrations tests. Now, this script will be deploying a smart contract, which will be considered as Bank on the Ethereum blockchain. As it's using its deployment, it will be settling into the friend address, which will then have our second account, which will have a list which we typically provided from the environment of the Ethereum node. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and start actually running this test. So since we already made our piece, we're going to go ahead and just make sure we have Ganache which will pop up currently. What we need to do real quickly is go over to the Truffle config, go to the deployment, which we said again, deployment is going to be specific to Ganache, which will be on that local host. We're going to run back over to here. We're going to open up a terminal. I don't like really using PowerShell very much. I like using git bash, so because of that, I will make sure to use so. I will use Truffle compile. We'll just compile and build me a build, which should give me some sort of JSON file for my API. Now what we're going to do is do Truffle migrate. All right, looks like it passed. Now we're going to be using the next feature in Truffle, which will be our Truffle test. So this code is going to test the functionality of the bank smart contract. It initially sets up the bank variable, which will be represented as the deployed contract. The owner will be the first account, and the friend will be the second account. Before we run any tests, the bank contract will be deployed as a friend as the parameter, which this was a reference to the constructor that we had currently. We had to set some sort of an address. We're going to do a test, which is going to make sure that the deployed contract has been confirmed and that the address is not empty or /null. The second thing is going to be that the owner will be able to deposit 2 ETH to the contract, while the friend will be able to deposit 1 ETH. Then check if the balances within the contract match the amounts. The third test will be the owner that sends the 1 ETH from the owner to the friend using the contract transfer functionality. Then it will check for the new balances within the contract. For the expected owner will have a 1 ETH, while the friend will have 2 ETH. In short, this code will basically ensure that the bank contract correctly handled deposits, bank checks, and transfers. All right, so let's go ahead and run through this test. Beautiful. Looks like all tests had passed. Should the deploy the contract, should it deposit ETH, and then send the ETH to the friend. Alright everyone, that wraps up our tutorial for today. What we just walked through was a simple representation of a bank transfer using a smart contract. We utilized Truffle framework and be able to do our tests to ensure our correctness. However, I must emphasize, if you are thinking of deploying something similar onto the Ethereum mainnet, please get verified by a professional auditor. It's crucial to ensure the safety and functionality of your contracts. I truly hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Remember, the world of blockchain is vast and there's always something new to learn. So until the next time, happy coding, and I hope I see you in the next video. Bye bye now.